They pulled her up on a Tuesday morning, tangled in the old bridge's pilings, 14 fathoms down, still clutching the camera. Marcus didn't believe the call at first. Not after 27 years. He stood on the wooden dock at Harper's Ferry, watching divers in dry suits maneuver a vinyl body bag. The river was brown. October always made it brown. He'd forgotten that. "You the one who reported her?" A state police detective in a windbreaker stood beside him. Her name tag said Walsh. She was maybe 30, young enough to never have heard of Sarah Chen before today. Marcus nodded. He was 61 now, gray where he used to be dark. "Says here you were the last person who saw her." "Last person who saw her alive," Marcus said. The difference mattered. They wouldn't let him see the body. Not yet. But they showed him the camera, a Pentax K1000, film still inside, the plastic rewind knob still half-cocked like she'd stopped mid-motion. Beside it, sealed in its own evidence bag, a single Polaroid photograph. He couldn't see it clearly from where he stood, but he recognized the slip of white cardstock. He'd held it before, once, 39 days before she vanished. "You know what's on this?" Walsh asked, holding it up to the fluorescent light of the evidence room. Marcus shook his head. He was lying. "Neither do we," Walsh said. "No timestamp, no date written on it, but based on the Polaroid stock number, discontinued in '86, we're guessing she took this sometime in that window, the night she disappeared maybe the day before." The camera was still sealed in its original Pentax box in his bedroom closet. He'd kept it there for 3 decades. He'd never loaded it. But Sarah had. The thing about Sarah was that she saw things nobody else saw. She'd been an artist. Not professionally. Not yet. She was only 19. But the way she looked at the world, it was like she was translating something, light into shadow, silence into color. She'd come to the river, at odd hours with her camera and her sketchbook, catching the bridge at times when most people were asleep. Marcus had been her friend. Closer than that. Maybe, but they'd never talked about it. By 1987, they'd known each other since 10th grade. 5 years of late nights. 5 years of him watching her watch things. The last time he'd seen her, she'd been walking toward the bridge with a fresh pack of Polaroid film under her arm. "Where are you going?" he'd asked. "Water looks different at midnight," she'd said. "I want to see if the camera agrees." He'd offered to come. She'd said no. She'd done that a lot. Said no to company. It wasn't mean. It was just her way. The world was too full of other people's noise. She only came alive alone. He'd gone home instead. His mom was waiting. There was dinner to eat, television to watch. By the time he thought to call her back, it was past 1 in the morning. Too late. She didn't answer. By morning, she was gone. "Tell me about the 1987 investigation," Walsh said. She had a coffee in one hand, a slim folder in the other. The folder looked like it contained maybe 4 pages. A missing person from 27 years ago didn't rate thick files. Marcus sat in the small police station interview room, a place he'd been 3 times before, 1987, 1992, 2001. Each time, hoping they'd found her. Each time, disappointed. "It was summer," he started. "July 3rd. She said she was going to the river. Said she'd be back by 6. She'd tell her parents." "No." She lived in the group house with 3 roommates. Artist collective thing. Nobody checked on anyone. "So when was she reported missing?" "Not for 18 hours. Roommate thought she'd gone to the city. Happened all the time." Walsh wrote something down. "And you? Why didn't you report her sooner?" Marcus looked at his hands. He'd asked himself this question roughly 10,000 times. "I didn't think anything bad had happened," he said. "Sarah did things on her own schedule. The idea that she wouldn't come back, It didn't fit. Until it did. Until it did. The search for Sarah Chen had lasted 49 days. The police dragged the river twice, brought in dogs, posted her picture on telephone poles and in stores. A 19-year-old Asian girl with black hair and silver rings on every finger. Unremarkable until you saw her. Then she was the only person in any room. Marcus had helped. He'd walked the banks. He'd spoken to people at the diner, where she sometimes sketched. He'd looked at the woods, like they might tell him something. They never did. By August, the search was unofficial. By September, it was over. The case was filed as missing person, presumed drowned. The river had taken her. That was the story. That was always the story near the bridge. The river had a hunger. Marcus had tried to move on. He'd gone to college, studied engineering, got a job, married, divorced, remarried, built a life in the spaces between then and now, and tried not to think about the girl who saw things. But he'd kept the camera. He didn't know why. He'd told himself it was evidence that someday, when technology improved, they'd figure out what she'd been photographing. When he was honest with himself in the dark hours of the morning, he admitted the truth. He was waiting for forgiveness he'd never earned. The Pentax K1000, the forensic specialist said. Her name was Diana, and she seemed genuinely fascinated by the camera in a way that made Marcus's throat tight. Military surplus, rugged, durable. You can run one through a river for 27 years, and it'll still work. The film still inside? Walsh leaned forward. Sealed chamber. The camera's airtight by design. Look. Diana held it up to the light. Through the small window on the back, they could see the faint outline of the film cartridge, still spooled halfway through. This tells us something. She was taking pictures. She didn't rewind. She was interrupted mid-roll. Marcus knew what Diana didn't. The camera hadn't been in the water for 27 years. It had been in his closet. But he didn't say anything. The Polaroid photograph showed water and light. That was Marcus's first thought, when Diana finally unsealed the evidence bag and laid it on the gray metal table. Just water and light. A slice of river at an angle he didn't recognize. But the composition was so perfectly Sarah that he felt his chest break a little. Can you identify the location? Walsh asked. Marcus shook his head. He was sweating. The bridge structure, Diana said, pointing. That lattice pattern. That's definitely the Harper's Ferry Bridge. But look at the water. It's catching the light from below. That's not possible. Unless what? Walsh was writing again. Unless she was shooting from inside the river, Diana said. Or the river was doing something unusual. The water's reflection has a wavelength I've never seen in a bridge photo. Marcus's hands were shaking. He sat on them. We'll send it to the university, Diana continued. They have a lab that can analyze Polaroid chemistry. The specific composition of the emulsion can sometimes tell us when it was taken, not precise, but within a year or two. And the rest of the roll? Walsh asked. Whatever's still in that camera? We'll develop it, Diana said. See what we can recover. Marcus thought about his closet, about the empty Pentax box, about his 39 days of not knowing. He thought about the night Sarah had walked to the river with fresh Polaroid film. She'd never come back. But something had. That night, alone in his hotel room in the small Virginia town he'd left behind 27 years ago, Marcus did something he'd promised himself he'd never do. He called his ex-wife. Margaret, he said when she answered, it's me. There was a pause. I saw the news. The girl from school. Yeah. You're there. Yeah. Marcus. She stopped. Don't do this to yourself again. She was carrying a camera, he said. Photography equipment. But here's the thing. Here's the weird part. The camera is sealed. It's airtight. If she'd gone into the river with it, wearing a backpack or holding it, The pressure would have crushed it, or the water would have gotten in. But it didn't. It's pristine. Diana, the forensics person, she said she's only seen one other case like that. 30 years ago. Woman who was in a sealed container for weeks before she went in the water. Marcus. What if she didn't die in the river? What if the river was just where she ended up? What if someone— Stop, Margaret said. She sounded tired. Stop making up stories. Stop making mysteries where there's just sadness. He hung up after that. He didn't know what else to say. The developed film came back on Friday. 36 frames. Most of them were what Marcus expected. River shots. Bridge from different angles. The specific quality of light at different hours. Sarah's obsessions made visible. But frame 19 was different. It was a self-portrait. Sarah holding the camera at arm's length. The bridge behind her. The river a blur of reflection. She was smiling. Her eyes were alive with that thing Marcus never had a name for. The thing that made her see. And behind her, barely visible in the frame, but definitely there, was a figure. Blurred. Moving. Someone else. "Do we have a name?" Walsh asked. She was looking at a blown-up print of the photo. Study circles drawn around the figure in the background. "No," Marcus said. The lie came out smooth. "I don't recognize them." It was his voice he heard on the bridge that night. Though he hadn't been there, it was his hand reaching out. Though he was 3 miles away, it was his moment that he'd spent 27 years stealing from Sarah, taking for himself, living inside like a locked room. He'd called her after. Hours later, 5 in the morning, begged her to meet him, said he'd been stupid, said he couldn't lose her, said she was the only thing he understood. She hadn't answered the phone. She never did answer. He'd told himself she'd gone to the river and drowned. He'd told himself it was tragic coincidence. He'd told himself the absence of her body was proof that the river had kept her. He'd built a life on the story of her drowning. But what if there was no body? What if there was just a camera, dropped and sealed and waiting, and a girl who'd learned to disappear? "There's something else," Diana said. She was holding a magnified image of the film negative. "This frame, here frame 28. It's been exposed twice. There's an earlier image underneath." Walsh leaned in. "What does that mean?" "It means the photographer loaded this film before Sarah had this camera," Diana said. "Means someone else took at least 28 photographs on this roll before Sarah used it. Means this isn't just her film. This is a used roll." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Can we see the earlier images?" Walsh asked. "Not well. The emulsion's been corrupted by time and water, but we can see hints, shapes, patterns." Diana clicked to the next image. It showed ghosted shadows underneath the bridge photograph. Not much. A shape that might have been a person. A shape that might have been a car. Angles that suggested a location. Blurred hints of a story underneath Sarah's story. "We'll send this to DC," Diana said. "They have better labs. Might be able to extract something. Might be nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Marcus knew it wasn't nothing. The camera hadn't been Sarah's. The Pentax box in his closet. He'd found it in a pawn shop in 1989. He'd bought it because it was the kind of thing Sarah would have owned. He'd carried it like a relic. He'd convinced himself that someday he'd load it, take photographs with it, and maybe understand what she'd seen. He'd never put a single roll of film inside it. The Pentax in the evidence room wasn't his. Someone else had owned it. Someone else had used it. Someone else had loaded it with old film from an earlier roll, and Sarah had found that camera. Where? When? How? Marcus requested a meeting with Walsh at the police station. This time, he didn't wait in the interview room. He asked to speak with her in her office. Private. She was suspicious, but she let him talk. "I think someone gave her the camera," Marcus said. "The night she disappeared. I think she didn't go to the river because she wanted to. I think she went because someone asked her to. You're speculating. The film is loaded with old stock. Someone had used part of that roll already. They loaded new film into the same camera. Why? Because they wanted Sarah to document something. Because they wanted a record of something. And something went wrong. And you know this how? I know Sarah, Marcus said. I know how her mind worked. She wouldn't have just gone to the river at midnight, on a whim. She'd have a reason. She'd have been asked. Walsh was quiet for a long time. Then is there something you want to tell me? Something from 1987 that you left out? Marcus thought about lying. He thought about the locked room inside him. The place where Sarah was always walking toward the bridge with film under her arm. The place where he didn't call her back. The place where he let her vanish. No, he said. It was a different kind of lie. The university lab called on Tuesday. They'd extracted enough information from the double-exposed film to create a composite image. Diana showed it to Marcus in the forensic room, on a computer screen, the pixels glowing with 27 years of hidden history. It was a photograph of a man, tall, young, features blurred but recognizable in shape. He was standing by a car, a Chevy Caprice, maybe 1985, with the lights of the bridge behind him, and he was holding something, a package, an envelope, his hand extended like he was showing it to the camera. Ring any bells? Walsh asked. Marcus shook his head. It was true and false at once. We ran the car against registration records from 1987, Diana said. Found a Chevy Caprice in blue, registered to a Tom Davison, worked at the railroad, had a criminal record for assault, lived 8 blocks from where Sarah's roommates reported she was heading the night she disappeared. Where is he now? Marcus asked. Dead, Walsh said. Car accident, 1989. You might have seen it in the local news. Single vehicle, went off Route 9, burned pretty bad. Autopsy said he had traces of alcohol in his system, but the fire destroyed most of the evidence. Marcus knew that car accident. He'd heard about it in 1989 and felt something shift inside himself. Relief. Permission. A kind of closure that came with knowing the person he'd never been brave enough to name had been erased by something larger than both of them. So where's Sarah? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. That's the question, Walsh said. If she was in the Caprice when it went off the road, you would have found remains. We would have. Unless, Diana hesitated. Unless what? Marcus prompted. Unless she was already gone, Diana said quietly. Unless the Caprice was at the bridge, and something happened at the bridge, and the car went off the road for a different reason entirely, and Sarah was somewhere else. The room was very still. The body we found, Walsh said, was wrapped in a tarp, weighted with concrete blocks from a construction site. There was nothing in the body's pockets except the camera. No wallet, no ID, just the camera, sealed and waiting for us to find her, eventually, and know what had happened. How long had she been in the water? Marcus asked. Coroner's estimate? 20 years, give or take a few. Not 27. 7 years unaccounted for. Unless someone kept her out of the water for 7 years, Diana said. Unless she was somewhere else first. Marcus drove to the group house where Sarah had lived. It was still there. Still painted the same faded blue. A different group of young artists lived inside it now. Their laundry on the porch. Their dreams spreading across the floorboards like hers had once done. He walked to the river without meaning to. His feet knew the way. 27 years was nothing to muscle memory. 27 years was just his body being younger and older at the same time. The bridge looked exactly the same. The pilings were unchanged. The water ran the same way. It was Marcus who had changed. Marcus who had aged while the world stayed constant. Marcus, who had lived while Sarah had been somewhere else. Somewhere other than the river being somewhere else. He pulled out his phone and called Walsh. "I need to tell you something," he said. She was quiet, waiting. Sarah had a camera, a Pentax K1000. She brought it home from a pawn shop in 1985. She showed it to me once, said it had a weird quality, like it had seen too much, like the images underneath the new photographs were bleeding through. Marcus. I bought one after she disappeared. I kept it. I kept it for 39 years. I was going to load it with film someday and understand what she was trying to see, but I never did. I just kept it empty, like she might come back and show me how. Where is it? My apartment in DC, in my closet, in the original Pentax box. I'll give it to you. I'll give you everything. But I need to know something first. What? When you develop the rest of the Pentax, the one you found, when you see all the photographs she took that night, will you tell me what she was looking at? Will you tell me what she saw? Walsh didn't answer for a long time. Yeah, she said finally. I will. The remaining frames told a story in fragments. Sarah, at the edge of the water. Sarah, with the bridge behind her. Sarah laughing at something outside the frame. Sarah with her eyes closed, her face tilted toward the light, and then Sarah running. Sarah looking back over her shoulder. Sarah with her hand reaching toward the camera. And then the film ended. They sent the photographs to the FBI. They reopened the case. They exhumed what remained and ran DNA comparisons. The body in the river was Sarah. The body that had been there for approximately 20 years. The body that had been someone's secret for 7 years. Tom Davison had worked at the railroad. He'd had access to isolated locations. He'd had access to private spaces. He'd had keys. They found her belongings in the basement of a storage facility in Ashland. Her clothes, her sketchbooks, her letters, a calendar marked with dates that meant nothing until they meant everything. She'd been alive. She'd been somewhere. She'd been kept. And then she wasn't. The final entry in her sketchbook was dated July 10th, 1987, 7 days after she disappeared. I see things others don't, she'd written, but I don't know what to do with what I see. Maybe that's why he wanted the camera. Maybe he wanted me to document something. But I think the only thing I'm documenting is myself disappearing. The handwriting was shaky. The next page was blank. Marcus didn't go to the funeral. Sarah's parents had moved away decades ago. There were no close relatives left. The city arranged a small ceremony with a police honor guard, and Sarah was buried next to a plot that had been empty for 27 years. The grave her mother had bought when they thought she was drowned in the river, when the story was simpler. Walsh called him after the service. The camera in your closet, she said. We scanned it. There's something written inside the film chamber. Tiny letters. Someone carved them into the metal with a pencil or a pin. What do they say? For the person who sees. And a date, March 1985. Marcus understood then, understood completely. The camera had never been meant for him. The camera had been left for Sarah by someone else. Someone who'd seen her looking and recognized the hunger in it. Someone who'd known she was the kind of person who could see things other people missed. Someone had given her a gift. Someone had made her a target. Marcus, Walsh said, I need you to understand something. None of this is your fault. You couldn't have known. I knew her, Marcus said, and I let her walk to the river alone. She would have gone anyway. I know. You were 19. You couldn't have stopped her. I know. But knowing wasn't the same as forgiving. Not knowing himself. Not knowing the young man he'd been. The one who'd chosen safety over bravery, comfort over truth. Not knowing he'd spent 27 years living in the wrong life, in the wrong body, in the wrong story. The camera in the evidence room was eventually returned to the police department's property room. It was filed as evidence. Kept, maintained. No one wanted to throw away a murder weapon, or a victim's final possession, or whatever the Pentax had been, maybe all three. Marcus went to see it once, after the case was closed, after Tom Davison's family had fought the charges and settled out of court for things they wouldn't disclose. The camera sat behind glass in a climate-controlled case, alongside Sarah's sketchbooks and letters, and the Polaroid photograph of her at the bridge with the blurred figure behind her. He stood in front of the glass for a long time. Then he turned around and walked back out into the world. 20 years later, on the anniversary of her burial, Marcus donated the Pentax camera from his closet to the city's art museum. He'd written a letter to accompany it, explaining where it came from and what it represented. He'd asked that it be displayed with a small placard. This camera belonged to a young artist named Sarah Chen. It was given to her by someone who recognized that she had the rare gift of seeing what others miss. It was meant to help her document the world as she understood it. Instead, it became a record of how fragile that gift can be, and how dangerous it is to shine too bright in the dark. The museum accepted it. They created an exhibit. They told the story of a young artist whose vision had been interrupted 73 years too early. They hung her photographs on white walls and let people stand in front of them and feel what Marcus felt. That strange combination of beauty and loss, of talent cut short, of time stolen. And sometimes, late at night, Marcus would wake from dreams of the bridge and the river, and he would think about the moment Sarah had held that camera at arm's length and smiled for the photograph. The moment before the figure came into the frame, the moment before everything changed. In the dream, he would run to her. He would call her name. He would stop her from taking that last shot, stop her from being there that night, stop her from being the kind of person who saw too much. But he never could catch her. She was always already gone. And he was left standing on the bridge, watching the river, understanding finally what she'd been trying to photograph all along. Not the water, not the light, but the moment between being seen and being gone. The moment between the two.